logged in, say hello. All right, I am live on my landlord coach page and hello, my landlord coach page, my personal page, and on YouTube. So it's nice to see everybody tonight. The reason I'm going live on all three channels today is because I know normally my friends who are absolutely sick of me being on my personal page with this stuff, but this is actually stuff that you really need to know as a human being. And if you're going to live in a industrialized nation, you just have to know some certain basics about just stuff in general. And this is particularly, I'm going over this some maintenance basics tonight, because there's so many things in maintenance and things that come along. Like, again, we drive our cars. We know what we're doing. You stick the key in the ignition, or well, I don't even think you're going to do that anymore, right? You did it on cars built after 2000 or prior to 2010. They don't even stick keys in ignitions anymore. But just stick the key in ignition, you turn the switch, and it should do something, right? It should turn over, it should start, it should run. And if it doesn't, then you have a problem, right? You got to figure out what it's doing, why it's not starting, why it's not running, that sort of thing. Well, if you're going to live inside, right, i.e. you don't live under a bridge and you don't live in a tent, but if you're going to live in a property, you need to have some idea in terms of what stuff does. And I run into this stuff all the time. I talk to investors and just people in general all the time about stuff that, quite frankly, they should know about. And I'm switching between pages here, so if you have a comment, I apologize if I miss it. But there's so many people that just don't have any clue in terms of how stuff works, and as a result, especially if you're a homeowner or if you're a real estate investor, you need to have some sense in terms of what people are telling you. And I run into this stuff literally all the time because I've got maintenance technicians that are working for me. I've got vendors that do work for me, and I've got owners that I have to communicate that stuff to. But I also coach a lot of real estate investors that literally don't have a clue in terms of what they're talking about. I'll give you a quick example. Do you know the difference between flooring types? And when I'm talking about flooring, do you know the difference between sheet vinyl and vinyl plank flooring? Okay, there is a difference, and there's a significant difference in installation costs, and there's also a significant difference in price and durability. That's a pretty simple one. When we're talking plumbing, do you know the difference between copper pipes and PEX pipes? Do you know what Wearsbo plumbing is? Those are all different types of plumbing that you should know, and there are significant differences in cost if you're going to have one worked on versus another. There's just a lot of things that go into that stuff. Like, for example, the other day, I was working with a maintenance technician, and we were walking through just different interrelated systems that go on in a refrigerator. Now, I can work on some of this stuff, but I know enough about this because I've taken the time to educate myself that if someone comes to me and they say, oh, the refrigerator thermostat isn't working, I know pretty quickly that they don't know what they're talking about, because you don't generally use the word thermostat when you're talking about a refrigerator. Almost everybody universally in that side of things, they don't use thermostat unless they're specifically talking about a defrost thermostat inside the freezer compartment. Generally, if they're talking about the thing that makes it hotter or colder inside the refrigerator, that's called a cold control. So there's a defrost thermostat, which basically tells it's a safety mechanism, which tells the freezer that it's cold enough inside there to turn on the defrost cycle. So that's a defrost thermostat. It's the only time generally you're going to hear someone use the word thermostat in relation to a refrigerator. Otherwise, they're going to call it a cold control. And that's generally the little knob inside the refrigerator compartment that says, hey, I need more cold that come to be sent down from the freezer. That's on a top mount. So if you've got a top mount refrigerator, which means the freezer is on the top of the refrigerator, the cooling comes from the freezer compartment. You may not have realized that on most top mount refrigerators. Now, there are some that have their own evaporator coils and that sort of thing, but I'm just kind of giving you a broad scope of all this stuff, right? So, for example, as in general, you have to keep your furnace filters clean. Most people don't know why. They just go, oh, I have to replace my furnace filter. And if I don't, I guess it just, well, nothing bad happens for a while. But what can happen especially in the hot summer months is as that airflow gets restricted, it's making your basically your air handler or your air conditioning work a lot harder. Well, you don't really recognize it because it happens so slowly. But if you have pets, or you're in a really dusty environment, or you just where there's lots of particulates that get sucked into your furnace, well, that can cause major problems. Well, what happens sometimes is people will pull out their furnace filter and go, oh wow, that's really dirty, and they leave it out and they go, well, I'll have to buy a new one, and they leave it running without a furnace filter for a while. And that's really bad because now your furnace becomes the filter, and what's either an A coil or a slant coil or whatever, the evaporator coil, all that crap gets stuck up against there, and it will eventually fail. And what I mean that it'll fail is it's just working that compressor and the entire system a lot harder. And now you've got a major problem. And now you can be costing literally thousands of dollars because you didn't replace a $5 part, right? Or little things like, even knowing how the system works. It all starts basically with the thermostat. It goes from the thermostat to the control module, which is basically the electronic brains of the unit. The thermostat to the control module to, let's say it's a furnace in this example, it goes to the inducer motor. The inducer motor tells the pressure switch to go, blah, 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 right? So you've got all these systems that basically work in a line. Whereas in a refrigerator, you've got interrelated systems where you've got, say, the cold control and the compressor and the defrost timer all have to work together, and to make sure everything's running. And if one of those systems fails, then the whole thing doesn't work, right? It'll get wonky. Anyway, I know I'm talking about a lot of different things in a really short period of time here, but here's the thing. You need to get smart on some of these interrelated, or on some of these appliance related things, because there are things that are just really basic to fix. And if something doesn't sound right, question them. Don't just take your word for, their word for it. Just like if you were taking your car into a shop, if something doesn't sound right, like if what they're explaining to you doesn't sound right, question them. Just like the maintenance technician that's standing in front of you, if you're saying, well, that doesn't make sense what you're saying, can you explain it to me easier? They should be able to explain it to you. And especially if they're a professional, they should appreciate the fact that you're asking the question. And if you're a real estate investor, which really this is being directed towards, you have got to get in smarter on this stuff. You can't just take their word for it, because you're going to get taken to the cleaners by some unscrupulous maintenance repairmen or some contractors. There's not a lot to know. I mean, there is a lot to know. There's a lot of details to know. But all I'm saying is take the time to educate yourself, on just some basic building stuff. And make sure you know what it is you're talking about. And if you want to watch the maintenance technician while they're working and ask them what they're doing along the way, don't be a pain in the ass about it. But just be inquisitive and say, hey, can you mind if I just watch what you're doing and, walk me through the repair? Some guys love to watch, to talk about what they're doing because they're really good at it, and that's what they're passionate about. Other might be a little bit more grouchy because they don't like anybody kibitzing or watching what they're doing. But I would honestly say, if I'm paying you good money, I at least have the right to look over your shoulder and see what it is that you're doing. And that's the way I learned a lot of the stuff when I was doing maintenance work back in the day. And there's a lot of stuff, there's really nothing I can't fix. I mean, personally, I like fixing stuff, but if you're walking, if you have a dryer that stops drying, for example, and they pull out one of these things, right? Do you know what this is? Well, if you don't, maybe you should know. This is basically a heat pack, what they might call it as a heat pack, but it's basically coils. You'll see the heating coils here, and the heating element. And the heating element sometimes goes bad, but not usually. Usually it's something else, and it's not the heating element that goes bad in your dryer when people are saying, oh, my dryer just isn't working anymore. Well, are your clothes getting warm when the thing runs? Yes. Then it's not your heating element. It's probably something restricting the airflow that's going out of your dryer, and it's usually, more often than not, a restriction in your in the vent that goes outside. And most times you can fix it yourself. You just need to go outside, see where the vent is coming out. It's usually clogged with, half a sweater or something that you've got, in that vent that's coming out against the louvers. It's real simple. If you're not sure, turn on your dryer, stand outside, and see if it's louvered vents, see if all 4 vents are blowing up. If the bottom ones are not opening up, the bottom ones are the ones it's going to restrict at the bottom first, right? Because the way gravity works, so it's going to blow up, and if it's not blowing at the bottom, generally you just need to get up there on a ladder and just poke it through with maybe a small screwdriver or something and get the thing cleaned out. I would recommend turning the dryer off before you do that. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with a face full of lint. But this is all stuff that you can easily do. Otherwise, you would end up having to pay someone else, 150, 250, whatever amount of money to get that thing fixed, depending on where you're at, because, just those costs of repairs are going to vary based on where you're at in the country. So that's basically everything I wanted to talk about tonight. So for you guys who are members of the Landlord Coach site, if you're on Landlord Coach and you are a member, I'm going to be talking much more in depth about specific maintenance items, specifically refrigerators, specifically dryers, washers, furnaces, air conditioning systems, things like that. I'm not going to get super in the weeds on stuff like that, in the details, but I am going to make sure that you do know some of the basics about what it is that you should be paying attention to, so you can do some of these repairs yourself, or at least if you know that what the issue is, you can direct your maintenance technician or your handyman to go do them, and that the repair should only take 45 minutes versus 2 or 3 hours, if that's what's going on. So anyway, that's all I've got for tonight. I hope you found this somewhat helpful. If you've got questions about anything in particular, feel free to ask, and I'm happy to do that on an Ask Coach session or a series or something else, because I realize there's a lot of people out there that have no clue what it is in terms of maintenance stuff. And that's actually something I had to recognize that I'm actually pretty good at. I just stopped teaching that stuff for a while because it was just something that I just forgot, honestly. I forgot that people didn't see value in that. So anyway, all right, guys, have a great rest of your evening. Remember, if you don't place a value on your free time, someone else will. Have a great evening. We'll see you.